We're going to talk going keto, and in this video I'm going to cover everything that I think you need to know about starting a ketogenic diet. Cowabunga dudes, if you're new to the channel, my name's Simon Bolter. I'm a retired professional MMA fighter, author, personal trainer. Over the years I've tried so many different diets. Two that I've had a lot of success with, the paleo diet and the ketogenic diet. Keto is the new hotness. It's everywhere. It's the most searched diet online. It's becoming extremely popular, and for good reason. It's so incredibly effective when it comes to losing weight, but also reducing inflammation, and it's been used to treat epilepsy, autoimmune diseases, and in my case, digestive problems. But there is an incredible amount of misinformation and bro science out there. Not only that, but if you don't know what you're doing and you don't do your due diligence and research beforehand, it can be quite easy to screw keto up. So I wanted to make a video covering the most important aspects of keto and what you need to know to get started. Keto is not a new diet. It's been around since the 20s and 30s when it was used to treat epilepsy in children. But over the last few years it has become extremely popular as it is so effective in weight loss. Weight loss is definitely the most common reason for starting a ketogenic diet. But if you're new to a low carb, high fat diet, it can be quite confusing and somewhat overwhelming at first if you don't know what you're doing. So let's get straight into it. We're going to talk going keto, and I'm going to cover everything that I think you need to know when starting a ketogenic diet. So keto or ketogenic refers to a state of ketosis, which is when your body is using fat and ketones for fuel as opposed to carbohydrates and glucose. Ketosis generally occurs when the body uses fat as its primary source of fuel by converting fatty acid into ketones in the absence of carbohydrates. Carb restriction is an inevitable part of going keto, as even a moderate amount of carbohydrates will usually kick a person out of ketosis. A ketogenic diet is made up of high amounts of healthy fats, moderate amount of protein, and low carbohydrates. Many people are terrified of eating fat, even healthy fats. The common thought is that the fat we eat automatically makes us gain body fat, which is just not true. It's all too common for people to think that if low carb is good for losing weight, then low fat must be even better. This isn't true at all, and the fact is our bodies require a fuel source, either carbohydrates or fat, and while fat is essential for us to survive and thrive, carbohydrates are not. What makes the ketogenic diet so effective for weight loss is that it keeps your insulin levels consistently low throughout the day. The more fluctuations in blood sugar and insulin that you create throughout the day, the more your body is going to struggle to lose weight. The more fluctuations in blood sugar that you create, the more insulin that is produced, causing more energy to be stored as fat. Insulin works to remove excess sugar from the bloodstream. Fat loss cannot occur when insulin is active. Insulin tells the body to stop burning fat and instead absorb some of the fatty acids and glucose and store them. So the more carbohydrates that you eat, the more insulin that your body produces. The longer that insulin is active, the harder it becomes to burn fat. So this is why the ketogenic diet is so effective for weight loss, because your insulin levels are consistently lower throughout the day, so your body is constantly burning fat instead of storing it. This is essentially why it can still be difficult to lose weight on a low calorie, low fat diet based around carbohydrate. If you cut out fat, then you're left with carbohydrate as your main fuel source, which elevates your blood sugar levels, which produces more insulin, which causes your body to store more body fat. The ketogenic diet helps your body become more efficient at burning your body fat and the fat that you eat as fuel. Despite the absence of carbs, a ketogenic diet will leave you feeling satisfied and helps diminish hunger cravings massively. Once they become fat adapted, many people on a ketogenic diet will find that they get hungry much less. Many people find that they actually have to remind themselves to eat because they just aren't experiencing hunger cravings anymore. A Ketogenic diet means a high ratio of fat with every meal. Usually 60 to 80% of your daily calories coming from fat. That exact ratio will differ from person to person depending on your metabolism and also how fat adapted you are. You may find that those ratios will change depending on how long you've been on a diet for. Most experts believe that in order to stay in ketosis, you need to be eating 65 to 80% fat, 15 to 25% protein, and 5 to 10% carbohydrates. And there's a little flexibility there from person to person. If you're extremely well fat adapted, you can probably get away with eating more protein and a little bit more carbohydrates. If you're very active and you exercise a lot like myself, you might get away with, again, eating more protein and carbohydrates. But for the most part, those are the ratios that you've got to work with, and there's a little bit of flexibility within there. So in terms of carbohydrates, you're looking at around a maximum of 50 grams total carbohydrates. That hard limit, 50 grams total carbohydrates. That's your net carbs plus your fiber. For some people, it's going to be a lot lower than that. If you're not fat adapted, you're just coming into the diet, or you've got metabolic damage, then you may well have to bring that right down. Some people, in order to stay in ketosis, they might have to take that much lower. Personally, I found that I can take that a little bit higher, but I'm very active and well fat adapted. A very common point of confusion when people first start the ketogenic diet is working out net carbs or total carbs. A lot of people want to know which one they should track. Total carbs essentially means the net carbs plus the fiber. Here in the UK, all our food labels, all our nutritional info on our food labels list the net carbs. So that hard limit of 50 grams total carbohydrates, that works out to be roughly 25 grams of net carbs. Again, that number will be different for different people. Some people will be able to take it a bit higher. Some people will need to take it much lower in order to stay in ketosis. Here in the UK, our nutritional info on our food labels lists net carbs, so naturally I'm going to track net carb. At the end of the day, it's completely up to you. Go with whatever is easier for you, but I think that net carbs is just the easier option. So we're looking at 50 grams total carbohydrates, or about 25 grams of net carbs, maybe a bit lower as your hard limit. But wherever you're from, we're aiming for 25-ish net carbs. So that means that all grains, sugars and sweetened drinks are now out, as they will kick you out of ketosis very fast. Starches like potatoes, fruit juice drinks and most protein bars are out because they will kick you out of ketosis as well. There are some protein bars which are okay in keto, but read the label, most of them actually do contain quite a few carbs. 50 grams of total carbs allows for a pretty hefty amount of green leafy vegetables and a few more carbs here and there from things like nuts, seeds and berries. And again, it might be possible for you to eat more than 50 grams of total carbohydrates and still stay in ketosis if you're very active and well fat adapted. But for most people, 50 grams total carbs is going to be a hard limit in order to stay in ketosis. Protein is a tricky one on keto. It's very important in order to maintain muscle mass and to help recover from exercise and grow stronger, but too much can kick you out of ketosis. However, I think that the fear of protein on keto is enormously overstated. I would most definitely rather get too much protein on keto than not enough. But at the end of the day, you need to keep your protein intake high enough to maintain muscle mass, but low enough to remain in ketosis. But the more active a person is, the more they exercise, the better fat adapted they are, the more protein that they're gonna, not only will they be able to get away with eating more protein and stay in ketosis, but they'll actually require more protein in order to recover and grow stronger from exercise. But again, there's no one set in stone number for everyone. It's going to be very different for everybody because everybody has a different body. I have some general recommendations, but again, these are not set in stone. It's going to be different for everyone. I do recommend that everybody get at least, as a bare minimum, 1 gram of protein per day per kilogram of body weight as a bare minimum. If you're very active, you may want to take that up to 1.5 gram per kilo of body weight. And if you're extremely active like me and well fat adapted, you can take that up to 2 grams per kilo of body weight. At this point, I've spent a lot of time becoming fat adapted and I'm extremely active and skateboard for 2 or more hours per day, I found that I'm able to actually go well over 2 grams per kilo body weight per day of protein and still remain in ketosis. But not everyone is going to be that way. Everybody is different. Many people will need to keep their protein on the lower side in order to remain in ketosis, especially at first, during the first few months when you're first becoming fat adapted. But the most important thing is you're going to be building your diet, your meals around healthy sources of fat. Do not be afraid of eating a lot of fat. If you're going to be doing a ketogenic diet using fat as your main source of fuel, you cannot be afraid of eating fat. Fat is extremely satiating. It fills you up very quickly and can leave you feeling satisfied and full quite quickly. It is extremely unlikely that you're going to overeat on healthy sources of fat. So don't fear the fat. Many people cut carbs from their diet but are still averse to eating fat because they've been brainwashed by the mainstream media into thinking that eating fat is unhealthy. Cutting both carbs and fat from your diet is going to get you two things: Jack and shit, and Jack left town. If you cut both fat and carbs, you are heading for trouble. If you cut carbs, then you must add in a high amount of healthy fat. So the term fat adaptation or keto adaptation comes up quite a lot. What this means is a person has been on the ketogenic diet for a little while, usually a couple of months, and their body has become really efficient at using fat for fuel. They've adapted to burning fat in the absence of carbohydrates. Once you're fat adapted, you'll be able to use both fat and ketones for fuel, as well as carbohydrates and glucose. This is often called metabolic flexibility. This means that you've built the metabolic machinery needed to use both carbs and fat for fuel effectively. In this way, you're kind of like a hybrid car that can use both petrol and electricity for fuel. In this case, ketones are the cleaner fuel, much like electricity, but the body can still use gasoline that produces carbon dioxide and isn't as clean, or in this case, glucose that produces insulin. But when you first start a ketogenic diet, your body has to adapt to using fat for fuel, and this can take anywhere from a few weeks to a couple of months. Most people find that they are fat adapted in around 6 weeks and their hunger cravings massively diminish. But being keto adapted doesn't mean that you can't go back to eating carbohydrates. It just means that you are more effective at using fat for fuel, and you're able to switch between fat and carbohydrates more effectively whenever carbohydrates are available. Even if you add some carbs back into your diet and revert to, say, a paleo or low carb diet that isn't quite low enough in carbs to be ketogenic, you'll still be able to effectively use fat as a fuel source as well as carbohydrates, and you'll still have benefited from your time on the ketogenic diet. So once you've been pretty strict keto for a few months, you can choose to stay on keto, or you can start looking at other long-term options. But you'll have benefited by having built the metabolic flexibility to use both fat and carbs for fuel effectively. So if you choose to carb up or have a cheeky dessert every now and then, you'll be able to get right back on the horse and right back into ketosis much more quickly if you're fat adapted. People often report that once they're fat adapted, they get much less hunger cravings, their appetite begins to regulate, they have much more energy, they're not as tired throughout the day. And one of the biggest, most common benefits is mental clarity. People find that they're able to focus and think much more clearly on a ketogenic diet. But it takes a couple of months. It takes that getting through that initial teething period, sticking with the program, trusting the process for those first sort of say 1 to 2 months, around 6 weeks it's going to take to become fat adapted. But if you're just starting a ketogenic diet, you've probably been dependent on carbohydrates and you've been on that insulin blood sugar roller coaster for decades, so it makes sense that things are not going to change overnight magically. It takes a little bit of time and getting through that initial teething period, but if you're going prepared, stay on top of your electrolytes, eat enough fat and protein, it should go pretty smoothly. If you do that, there really is no reason for you to struggle or suffer on a ketogenic diet. Right, so let's talk about what to eat and what to avoid on a ketogenic diet. Now, first off, alcohol, at least for the first 60 days, should be off limits. Unless it's a special occasion, in order to become fat adapted and avoid hunger cravings, you really want to avoid alcohol for at least the first 60 days. That doesn't mean that you can't have some alcohol on the ketogenic diet. I definitely don't recommend it, but if you are going to drink, like whiskey and tequila have 0 carbs, so you might be able to get away with having those and not have it impact you too much. But most forms of alcohol are loaded with carbs, and it's important to remember that alcohol has what is called oxidative priority. It's toxic and the body has 0 capacity to store it. So whenever you consume alcohol, fat burning and fat loss goes completely to the back of the queue. Alcohol is toxic, so your body wants to get that out of the blood and out of the body as soon as possible. So when you drink alcohol, your body has to burn that first, and everything else takes a back burner, takes a back seat. So burning ketones, producing ketos, fat burning goes completely on the back burner, and your body has to sort out the alcohol first. So my recommendation is don't drink alcohol for the first 60 days, and after that, if you choose to, you're probably going to be best off with hard liquors like tequila and whiskey with no carbs, and clean dry wines. Although again, you can have a much easier time if you just avoid alcohol. So unless it's a special occasion, don't drink. In terms of drinks, beverages to drink, most sweetened drinks are going to be out. So many of the drinks that we consume in today's society are loaded with sugar, carbs. You're best off with things like water, tea, green and white tea, coffee, black coffee ideally. However, most coffee drinks at places like Starbucks, Costa Coffee or something like that are going to be loaded with carbs and sugar. Definitely want to avoid those. If you're going to drink coffee, drink it black or drink it with a little bit of healthy fat in there, something like coconut oil. Most baking ingredients are going to be out as well, like traditional flours, complete no-goes. They're grain based, but you can still have like almond flour, coconut flour. They are fantastic to bake with, and it's possible to make almost anything paleo or keto friendly using those flours. Big one to avoid are going to be refined processed oils, stuff like canola oil, sunflower oil. These oils are one of the foods that you're going to want to avoid the most. They are extremely inflammatory, and they're also found in not just refined vegetable oils, but canola oil, for example, is known as rapeseed oil in the UK, and is found in so many mayonnaise products, sauces and salad dressings. It's ridiculous. They're made with high temperature processing methods that are highly destructive and involve various chemicals. This causes oxidative damage that gets worse when the oils are exposed to light, heat and oxygen. So what can you use instead? I recommend cooking with grass-fed butter, coconut oil, maybe avocado oil or standard olive oil. In terms of drizzling on your foods like your salad, I'm going to recommend extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. You definitely don't want to cook with extra virgin olive oil. Drizzle that on your salad, but it's absolutely fine to cook with standard olive oil. Avoid fast food and highly processed foods in general. They tend to contain a ton of these refined oils as well as trans fats that your body does not even recognize and doesn't know what to do with. So do your best to avoid processed food, junk food, takeout, even if it's keto macro friendly and technically keto. If it's highly processed junk food, just try and avoid it. So it should go about saying that all grains are out, pasta, bread, rice, stuff like that. It's just going to increase your blood sugar levels, spike insulin, and kick you out of ketosis mega fast, so avoid grains. In terms of dairy, you're going to want to go for the full fat options. Now, I don't eat dairy, I eat a paleo ketogenic diet, but if you choose to, go for the full fat options. So ideally, you're going to want to eat a lot of fatty meat, beef, chicken thighs, lamb in particular, my favorite. You're going to want to go for the high fat beef, the 80-20 beef ideally. Chicken thighs are great as well. Lamb is probably the most overlooked meat and my favorite keto and paleo food. Lamb chops, lamb steaks, lamb burgers, lamb mince. Lamb mince is great. I know people like to have a lot of ground beef or on keto, but like ground lamb mince as we call it in the UK, is it's a little bit sweeter. I like the taste quite a lot more than ground beef, but If you are going to have chicken breast, which is not really recommended because it's very low in fat, you're going to want to put some extra fatty oil on there, or have something like an avocado with it. Fish is great as well. Again, go for the fatty stuff like salmon is absolutely ideal on keto. Don't be afraid to drizzle it with a bunch of extra virgin olive oil. And then eggs and bacon, probably the official breakfast of the ketogenic diet. So many people eat egg and bacon with some avocado for breakfast. Absolutely great. Can't really go wrong with it. And then one of my favorite parts of the ketogenic diet, especially to snack on, are nuts and seeds. Macadamia nuts, almonds are probably my favorite. Really ideal macro breakdown for keto. Almond butter for me is an absolute lifesaver, especially if I'm just like want a little snack to keep me going. Be careful with the nuts and the nut butters though, they can be really easy to overeat on. I could have a whole tub of almond butter quite happily in one go. I'll have a couple of tablespoons there before I know it, the whole bloody jar is just gone. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds are particularly great on keto, definitely recommend them. A handful of nuts and seeds are absolutely awesome as a keto snack, definitely recommend them. Green leafy vegetables are highly recommended by me on the ketogenic diet. Spinach and kale in particular are absolutely awesome. Probably going to feel quite full most of the time anyway when you're eating such a high fat diet, but they do help to fill you up as well. Avocado is probably one of the most important foods on a ketogenic diet because it's high in potassium, and electrolytes can become a pretty big issue on a keto diet. So I definitely recommend eating at least one avocado a day in order to keep your potassium high. Not only are avocados loaded in potassium, but they are one of the best sources of healthy fats that you can possibly eat. So you can have avocado and you can have berries on a ketogenic diet, usually. Raspberries and blueberries, for example, are low in carbs, low in sugar, and they do help a little bit if you've got that little bit of a sweet tooth. Berries can be a really good snack or dessert. Again, they can be quite easy to go nuts on and overeat on. There is potential for them to kick you out of ketosis. Eat berries in moderation. Another useful sweet treat is very dark chocolate is usually absolutely fine on the ketogenic diet. Again, some people who are still becoming fat adapted or really sensitive to carbs might not be able to have dark chocolate and stay in ketosis. But if you choose the 85 or 90% cacao dark chocolate, usually that makes it really good sweet treat on keto. Good thing is I find that it's a little bit harder to overeat on because it's not super sweet, it's a little bit bitter because of the high amount of cacao in there. So unlike milk chocolate, which I could quite happily eat tons of in one sitting, I find that a dark chocolate, like if I buy the Lindt 90% or something like that, I'm quite happy with just eating like a third of the big bar, and it doesn't kick me out of ketosis, and it satisfies my hunger cravings and like sweet tooth. So you might want to consider dark chocolate. It's not for everyone, just as berries are not for everyone on a ketogenic diet, but the option is there. MCT oil is a very good source of healthy fats. MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides, and they're a very rapidly available source of fat. They're kind of like a little bit like the ketogenic version of Gatorade or Powerade or Lucozade or something like that, but they don't massively spike insulin the way that a sugary drink like Powerade will. Although I will warn you, a very common side effect of having too much MCT oil is stomach upset, shall we say. Diarrhea can be caused by too much MCT oil, and it doesn't take that much. Like 1 tablespoon of MCT oil at one time is enough. But if you want a little bit of extra energy in the morning or before a workout, 1 or 2 tablespoons of MCT oil might do the trick. However, I definitely recommend acting on the cautious side. Start out with just a teaspoon or 1 tablespoon and move up from there. Because one thing is for sure, if you have too much MCT oil in one go, you'd better be wearing your brown trousers. So let's talk about the keto flu quickly. So when you go on a ketogenic diet, your body's going to flush out a lot of water, and unfortunately along with it, electrolytes. And we need electrolytes in order to function properly. If we don't get enough electrolytes such as potassium, sodium, calcium and magnesium, it can cause us to have muscle cramps and spasms, feel weak, dizzy, shaky, and it can cause headaches and cause us to just have an overall lack of energy. So when your body flushes out all of these electrolytes that you need, it can cause you to have sugar cravings, leave you feeling weak and dizzy and have a headache, a little bit like you're ill. Most of these side effects can be prevented or reversed very quickly by getting enough sodium. The easiest way to do that is with salt, and I don't recommend normal table salt. That's definitely not good for you. But pink Himalayan sea salt is one of the best sources of sodium on keto and paleo or some other low carb diet. Good first step is just to sprinkle a little bit of pink Himalayan sea salt on top of your food with every meal and snack. Some people even go so far as to put pink Himalayan sea salt in their water that they drink throughout the day. As I mentioned earlier, avocados are one of the most important foods on a ketogenic diet. They are full of potassium, so they are, in my opinion, a must. 1 or maybe 2 avocados a day. That will definitely help keep your electrolytes up, especially potassium. Green leafy vegetables are also going to help you keep your electrolytes high. And on top of that, I would definitely recommend a magnesium supplement as well. Keeping your electrolytes high and topping them up and staying hydrated is especially important in the first month on keto. Stay on top of your electrolytes, because a lot of the negative experiences that people have in their first month of keto can be completely avoided for the most part by staying on top of your electrolytes, getting in enough fat and staying hydrated. Right, so let's talk measuring your ketones. In my opinion, there's only one effective, accurate way to measure your ketones, and that is by pricking your finger with a blood ketone monitor. The urine strips and the breath testers are really very inaccurate. If you buy the urine strips and use those to test, you might as well be peeing away all your money. That's pretty much what you're doing. They are a complete waste of money. Now, you definitely don't need to be testing your ketones. Some people get a bit carried away with chasing high ketone numbers. You definitely don't need to be testing your ketone levels. Yeah, it is useful to measure your ketones. It does give you a little bit of context, but much like the number on a scale when you weigh yourself, your blood ketone numbers only tell part of the story. Yeah, they give you some context and tell part of the story, but they don't tell the whole story. So just like I recommend people don't chase a low number on a scale, don't get too caught up in chasing a high ketone number on your blood ketone readings. It's definitely useful. I do recommend people test their blood ketone levels if they want to, but it's definitely not essential. When you start having less hunger cravings, when you feel like you have more energy and you can focus more and have a lot more mental clarity, you'll know that you're producing ketones. And in terms of sweeteners, monk fruit and erythritol are probably your best bet, although like any sweetener, don't overdo it. Stevia is also fine, but don't overdo it because it might create a bit of an insulin response, although if you have it in moderation, it's probably not going to be enough to kick you out of ketosis. Xylitol sweetener is also fine, just again, don't overdo it. There are some pretty decent electrolyte supplements out there. Just be sure to check the potassium content. Many electrolyte supplements are really low on the potassium side. So what does this all look like in practice? A typical day of eating a ketogenic paleo diet for me looks like green tea and MCT oil in the morning, first thing. Later on in the morning for breakfast, I'll have eggs, maybe some bacon and avocado. Quite often when lunchtime rolls around, I'll have a salad with lots of leafy green vegetables, some lean meat like some chicken breast topped in lots of extra virgin olive oil. For dinner, I'll quite often have something like ground lamb mince, a steak or something like that, ground beef. Do like snacks. I have quite a lot of snacks as well, so that will be nuts and seeds. I have a lot of nuts and seeds, especially macadamia nuts and pumpkin seeds. Another great snack or morning meal that I like to have is a grain-free, low-carb paleo granola, which is mostly cashews, almonds, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, stuff like that. Chia, flax and hemp seeds are also really good sources of healthy fats and omega-3 fat. So I'll usually get peckish for a snack sort of late in the evening, so I'll have some nuts and seeds or maybe some dark chocolate, but I try not to overdo it and exercise moderation. A lot of people like to take the snacks, the fruits, the berries and the dark chocolate right up to the limit and see how much they can get away with, but try to actually exercise moderation. So that's it. We've covered a hell of a lot of info on the ketogenic diet there. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If this video has been useful to you, please hit the subscribe button. There will be plenty more videos like this to come. Cowabunga dudes.